Part 65. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy and Faye. Chapter 658. Chapter 642. I want you to die. The memory ends here. Unexpectedly, after so many years, she could still see the source of her nightmare. At midnight dreams, Moze's self-explosive picture will repeat the performance in front of her again and again. There are collapses and explosions around her, and every time she is woke up with her cold sweat. This day has come. Li Ju closed her eyes, her mind a little confused. Actually, she had a premonition of all this. She had already had a guess in her mind, but she didn't expect it to be confirmed so quickly. The screen suddenly went black, and Los's face, which was different from the one in his memory, disappeared in an instant. Shen Lu punched a hole in the console. Damn it! What does he want to do? With such a blatant provocation, do you think they are vegetarians? Li Ju pinched his eyebrows and said, he wants to settle things with us. I want to end things with them. Lo smiled and looked into Qi Sijin's murderous eyes, his tone unchanged. This also determines whether you can survive. Take him away. Qi Sijin and others were taken to a cliff. He was pushed along the way. Seeing the familiar scenery around him, he subconsciously said, This is not. He Yao asked in a low voice, do you know this place? Qi Sijin hummed, you were still young at that time and didn't remember what was normal. This is where we often discuss things privately. Los in front suddenly turned around and continued his unfinished words, I was fortunate enough to be brought here to participate. The two people's eyes instantly darkened, and their expressions turned extremely ugly. Qi Sijin felt so disgusted that he wanted to vomit, and said in a cold voice, are you sick? Who are you disgusting with? The person holding him behind him increased his strength and shouted, be honest. Luz didn't answer him and kept walking at the front. After arriving at the place, he closed his eyes and waited quietly for the arrival of Li Ju and others. They came faster than he expected. The group of people was so fierce that they blocked all escape routes. In comparison, Luz only brought a few people plus Qi Sijin and a few hostages. He was at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, but he still had a serious attitude. He looked calm and composed, showing no signs of panic. The moment he Yao saw Li Ju, her eyes lit up instantly, boss. Qi Sijin also shouted, boss. But after he finished shouting, he realized something was wrong. Why did his third uncle come with him? Even if Grandpa and the others are arrested, this is the command, and the third uncle is an ordinary person. Isn't he seeking death by following us? The third uncle came as soon as he came. Why are Lu Qingran and Bai Yuxiu here? Are they looking for death and forming a team? Qi Sijin looked at them with confusion. At the same time, after he called out the boss, Lu Qingran and Bai Yuxiu were dumbfounded at the same time. They stiffly turned their heads to look at Li Ju, sister-in-law, Ajin. Before he finished asking, Li Ju hummed in advance as if she had expected what he would say next. Lu Qingran. Bai Yuxiu. This time they really didn't expect it? This is so outrageous. Qi Sijin is actually from the second team. What a joke. He and Qi Jinkai usually look up and down at the Qi family. No matter how good their acting skills are, there will always be a day when the secret is exposed. How could they not find it? The two of them looked at Qi Jinkai at the same time. Qi Jinkai narrowed his eyes, turned his head to the side, and there was a softness in his eyes unconsciously, and asked, so, this is the reason why he has been abroad all year round. Li Ju nodded, well, he is all with us. This time, even Qi Jinkai had to squint his eyes and say, this kid's acting skills are really good. Even he didn't see it at all. The two people spoke calmly, as if they were talking about what to have for breakfast, but the two people behind them were different. Lu Qingran doubted life, this is unscientific. We have been with him for so long and didn't notice it at all. Did we make a mistake? Ningfeng glanced at him sideways, no doubt looking at an idiot. Who do you think the fourth brother that the third child called in the previous communication was? Lu Qingran was completely silent now. The two sides were for tat, and no one spoke to break the calm, and the atmosphere fell into stagnation. Finally, Lo suddenly spoke. I didn't expect that the famous Q god and 9 gods from the association would come. I thought Mr. Lo, was really honorable. Li Ju sneered, didn't you deliberately lure us here? What are you pretending to be? Lu said helplessly, Aju, the only ones I want to attract are your second team. God Q and the first team are really not within my scope of consideration. His eyes swept around the two of them and said with unclear meaning, I didn't expect that the two of you actually have such a relationship. His eyes fell on the two of them, sizing them up, making people feel a chill for no reason. Qi Saijan's eyes turned cold, and he moved Li Ju into his arms, blocking his sight. Los raised his eyebrows, looked at him for a moment, and chuckled, God Q, no, Third Master Qi, my goal is just Li Ju and the second team, and I have no intention of implicating you, so I advise you not to care too much. Nosy. The last few words imply a threat. Qi Jinkai seemed to have heard a very funny joke. The people tied behind you are my Qi family, and the person you want to kill is my fiancé. Do you think it has nothing to do with me? As soon as these words came out, Lu Qingran couldn't help but laugh. What kind of idiotic problem is this? Ha 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 made him laugh to death. Others also had trembling shoulders. Los's smile stiffened for a moment, and then quickly returned to normal. He gave a cold voice and said, since you don't have to drink wine as a penalty for the toast, let's stay together. After saying that, he took out something like a controller from his pocket and quickly pressed it. The next moment, a mental barrier rose from the ground, covering the sky, like a big net covering them all. Li Ju took a look and found that this barrier was different from ordinary mental power barriers. It seemed to be mixed with other substances. After being isolated, the scene inside was different from the outside world. It was darker and more gloomy. The air was filled with an uncomfortable wet and greasy feeling, constantly getting into every pore. Shen shrank his neck slightly, took out his weapon, and cursed secretly, What kind of thing from the underworld is this? The rest of the people entered a defensive state the moment the mental barrier appeared, staring at the opposite side with vigilance. Only Baimuo stared at the mental barrier thoughtfully. This feeling was so familiar, as if he had seen it somewhere. Suddenly, a very familiar aura came from beside her. It was Bai Yuxiu. He quietly moved a few steps toward her, completely protecting her behind him. Suddenly, a white light flashed in Baimuo's head. That's right. This mental barrier appeared when she was kidnapped, and was later broken directly by Bai Yuxiu from the outside. Then can this also be? Before she could finish thinking about it, Ross said, this is my special mental barrier, tailor-made for you. It can only be broken from the outside. You can never escape from the inside. He looked at Li Ju and Qi Saijan meaningfully, and added, even if you are a 3's level superpower, it will not help. NMD. Shen Lu couldn't bear it anymore and cursed, Loss, are you sick? You brought us here just to trap us and you in this broken mental barrier? What? Do you think you can't beat us? Are you going to trap us? He sneered, then you can try to see whether we will be trapped to death by you first, or you will be killed by us first. Los looked indifferent, opened his arms to him, exposed all the vital points on his body, and said, you can do whatever you want. If I don't want these people to be buried with me. You dash. Shen Lu was furious, but was stopped by Li Ju. She looked at Los with calm eyes, as if she was not surprised by his crazy behavior, and asked, tell me, what do you want? Loss put down his arms, his tone was extremely calm, but he seemed extremely gloomy and crazy. He said word by word, "I want you to die. I thought you had been dead for a long time. why wasn't you the one who died then? If it weren't for you, how could Mose die? He was my favorite toy. My favorite. But it's gone. There's nothing left. That old beast Laurent is also dead, and I have nothing. Why? Why don't you die? Okay, I'm crazy." End of this chapter. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy and Fay. Chapter 659. Chapter 643, My guess is good. Li Ju frowned. "So, this is your purpose?" "Of course not." Lu's vicious and cold eyes swept over everyone present, "and none of you, don't even think about running away. I will pay back to you double what I endured back then." Shen slightly snorted in amusement. "I thought there was some shocking conspiracy waiting for us, but it's just for this." Loss laughed. "Yes, is it surprising?" Looking at his lunatic state, Chi Sijin behind him looked disgusted. "Loss, you are really a lunatic. Like that dad of yours, it's disgusting. Laurent is a pervert, and Los is no less generous. I thought that he laid such a big plan and worked so hard to rebuild the alliance just to restart the seed plan. Unexpectedly, it turned out to be just to resolve their personal grudges." Those two words seemed to poke at the ambiguity in Ross's heart. The atmosphere around him immediately became gloomy. He slowly turned his head and looked directly at him with gloomy eyes. He suddenly raised his lips and smiled ferociously. "Yeah, I'm disgusting, I'm crazy." He raised his feet and walked towards him, saying at the same time, "Then I will show you, something even crazier dash." Suddenly, he suddenly changed direction, and under everyone's astonished gaze, he attacked Chi Mao Yi, strangled her neck, and treated her as a hostage, blocking her in front of him. "Why wait?" Mr. Chi exclaimed. He was about to make a move, but was immediately restrained. This move caught everyone off guard. Almost in an instant, Li Ju and everyone in the second team raised their weapons at Loss at the same time. With his index finger lightly holding the trigger, he could blow his head off immediately with just one opportunity. Li Ju's whole aura changed completely. He was in danger, like an enraged ferocious beast. His eyes were scarlet, and the violent energy that had been suppressed poured out. The murderous intention was clear in his tone, and he said every word, "Let go, open her." As soon as the words fell, everyone in the second team immediately stepped forward in cooperation, ready to take action at any time. Chi Sijin didn't expect that Los would suddenly attack Chi Mao Yi. He immediately went crazy and struggled to break away from the restraints behind him, trying to rush forward to save people. His eyes were red with anxiety, and he ignored his usual upbringing and yelled, You, lose. You dare to touch her." Even though he was injected with medicine, his body seemed to be bursting with power at this moment, and the two superpowers behind him could hardly suppress him. Before Chi Mao Yi could react to the situation, someone had already pinched her neck and made it difficult to breathe. Lu's force was so strong that he seemed to be able to crush her throat bone. Within a moment, the veins on her fair neck were exposed, her face turned purple, and she stretched out with all her strength. Mouth, but only a few broken syllables came out, Ajiu. Her eyes were wide open, filled with moisture, and her hands desperately pulled Los's hand to restrain her, but the other hand did not move at all. Gradually, she felt a sense of despair. "Help me." Listening to her out-of-tune words, Li Ju's eyes were about to burst, and the spiritual energy in his body surged wildly. Everyone within 3 meters of his body, except Chi Jinkai, felt as if there was a mountain-like pressure coming on top of his head, oppressing him. Out of breath. Li Ju didn't realize it at all, but the aura around him became even more compelling. "I say it one last time, let her go, some people couldn't bear it anymore. I go." I don't know who muttered. What is the nine gods doing? The other party is fine, and one of us is about to be crushed to death by her. This man was in a team. He was so suppressed by Li Ju's terrifying mental power that his legs almost gave out and he knelt on the ground. He asked for help from Ning Feng, who was closest to him. Hey! Brother, help! However, Ning Feng did not pay attention to him. Not only Ning Feng, everyone in the first team discovered that the aura of everyone in the second team had become very dangerous, as if they were awakened beasts, waiting for the next second to mercilessly tear their prey into pieces. He swallowed, wondering what the situation was now. Didn't you feel fine just now? When everyone was surprised, everyone in the second team stared at Los. They didn't change their eyes for a moment. Everyone's expressions were tense and solemn, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. Seeing their reaction, Luz looked around and couldn't help laughing up to the sky. He looked at Li Ju with a ferocious and proud expression. It seems that my guess was really good. Li Ju's hand holding the gun tightened. Behind her, Qi Jinkai looked worried. Luz relaxed her strength, allowing Qi Mao Yi to breathe and breathe fresh air. Before she could relax, the person behind her suddenly came closer, causing her to stiffen subconsciously, holding her breath, and not daring to move. The distance between the two became closer and closer, until Qi Mao Yi was so nervous that she could hardly breathe. He finally stopped, chuckled, and said in her ear, "Long time no see, MOA." Qi Mao Yi's mind went blank and she couldn't think about the meaning of his words. Even though we haven't seen each other for so many years, I don't even remember him. I'm so sad. What is he saying? I didn't expect that you are still alive. What does it mean? Qi Mao Yi suddenly felt a chill in her body. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy Enfe. Chapter 660. Chapter 644, Bloody Fate is actually man-made. She said blankly, what did you say? However, Lo seemed to be just teasing her. After saying this, he ignored her and raised his eyes to meet Li Ju's cold, razor-like eyes again. There was a successful smile on his lips. Aju, it's been so many years. What are you hiding from her? Qi Mao Yi felt anxious and looked at Li Ju with her eyes asking for confirmation. What was he talking about? Why can't I understand it? She now urgently needs an explanation. However, surprisingly, Li Ju did not go to see her and avoided her inquiry. For a time, Qi Mao Yi's bad premonition worsened. The group of people had been confused by Los's words. They looked at each other and saw confusion in each other's eyes. Why do they think they are about to get a big surprise? The air was quiet for a moment, and no one spoke. Lo scoffed coldly, I thought you were capable, but it turns out you didn't even dare to tell her the truth. Shut up. Qi Sijin couldn't bear it anymore and gave a sharp shout, completely interrupting his words. Beside him, Mr. Qi, who was also confused about the situation, cast his gaze at him and asked, Ajin, this. What does this have to do with Weiwei? What, are you scared? Seeing that he was furious, Ross raised his eyebrows slightly and said in a mocking tone, afraid that she knows that she is not an orphan at all, afraid that she knows that you were behind everything when she was adopted by the Qi family, or, afraid that she knows that her brother is because of you died. Boom. Gunshot. The bullet grazed the top of Ross's head. A few strands of hair quietly fell to the ground, but Los's expression did not change at all. Qi Mao Yi's face was extremely pale. It wasn't because of the bullet that he was frightened, but because of what Los had just said. The amount of information is too much. What does it mean that she is not an orphan? What do you mean her adoption was premeditated? What do you mean her brother died because of them? Why does she understand every word, but together, she can't understand it at all? Li Ju's voice was as cold as ice, chilling to the bone. Shut up. Loss, did I say something wrong? He looked at Chi Mao Yi, ignored her pale face, and directly told the cruel truth. Look at your good sister, you know? Your biological brother died to save her, but what about them? But they deleted all your memory, makes you forget everything in the past, including your brother. No. No, Ross sneered, you can ask them, ask everyone here, if this is true. Chi Mao Yi immediately turned her attention to Li Ju. Ajiu. Tell me this is not true, right? Li Ju was silent. Chi Mao Yi's breathing suddenly became rapid, and she turned her gaze to Chi Saijin again. Ajin, is this true? Chi Saijin lowered her eyes and said nothing. No, impossible. Loss felt ridiculous about her dying struggle, and gave her the final blow mercilessly. An experimental subject has been hidden for more than 10 years without being discovered. I am very curious, how did you do it? There was dead silence. He groaned and continued, let me guess, she has a special physique. She was selected by Laron as one of the #1 experimental subjects. She was also injected with nightmare. It stands to reason that she will not live long, but she is still alive and well. Someone suppressed the poison in her body? Chi Mao Yi trembled all over, her expression almost collapsed. Ross continued, nightmare targets the spiritual realm. Someone used mental power to suppress it, sealing her spiritual realm to prevent nightmare from spreading throughout her body. Let me guess again, the association has this ability. Of Zhongqing. He had a look of astonishment on his face. No wonder, he gradually retreated into the background because of his out-of-control ability. It turned out to be this reason. Li Ju looked very ugly as he listened to him guessing the reasons for everything. He had no doubt that if he didn't have Chi Mao Yi in his hands, she would definitely make him regret coming to this world. Others whispered, is what he said true? I don't know, I guess, I heard that the president's health did have problems more than 10 years ago. Damn it, doesn't this mean? Is everything he said true? The eyes of everyone in the group fell silently on Chi Jinkai, and they were filled with emotion. This is all a fate. Lu Qinggran felt goosebumps all over her body when she heard that. She subconsciously grabbed Ningfeng's sleeve, pulled it, and asked coquettishly, why Wei is really? Ningfeng frowned and nodded. Seeing the death look in his eyes, Lu Qinggran silently swallowed back the hum that came out of her mouth, and asked in a low voice, how could this happen? Ningfeng is also very annoyed now, and his heart is filled with panic. I don't know either, don't bother me. At that time, everyone unanimously approved the idea of letting Mo Wei live like an ordinary person, hoping that she would grow up without any worries. Who knew that she would be adopted by the Qi family in the end and become the eldest daughter of the Qi family overnight? This kind of mistake is really a bit bloody. I think back then, Qi Saijin repeatedly promised to take care of Mo Wei's affairs, but as soon as he turned around, he was taken back to the Qi family by his own grandfather. Etc. Ningfeng suddenly discovered the blind spot. He narrowed his eyes and secretly glanced at Qi Saijin opposite. With that said, he suddenly remembered that Qi Saijin had taken care of all Mo Wei's affairs by himself. Zhongqing and Li Ju were both at ease with him and let him go. Could this person be taking advantage of the opportunity to benefit from public service and deliberately let Mr. Qi adopt Mo Wei? Ningfeng thought for a moment, and it was definitely like this. This man is used to this kind of trick. He just said, there are not so many coincidences in the world. Sure enough, the fate is actually man-made. End of this chapter. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy Enfe. Chapter 661. Chapter 645. Are you crazy? More than 10 years have passed, and the mental power Zhongqing used to suppress the nightmare can't last long. So, what are you going to do? Should I suppress her with mental power again, or let her die? Los glanced at Chi Mao Yi playfully. I quite agree with the latter. After all, her brother is gone, how lonely it is to live alone in the world. You fart. Chi Saijin was emotional, his eyes filled with monstrous anger. A person like you can cough cough cough. He coughed suddenly and violently. Los clicked his tongue twice and said, "Fourth brother, don't get excited. The medicine I injected into you is not for those who are agitated and impatient. If this continues, if anything happens to you, I won't be able to explain it to Aju. You dash." Chi Saijin stared at him, breathing heavily, as if he wanted to cough out his lungs. "Fourth brother, calm down," He Yao said worriedly. Every time he encountered something like Chi Mao Yi's, he would lose his mind. If he hadn't been controlled, he would have torn Luz alive. He Yao looked at the current situation calmly. Los has hostages in hand, and the place is isolated from the outside world. The situation is very unfavorable for them. In addition, Luz deliberately brings up the past and keeps irritating Li Ju. If he continues, she may lose control. Just like 4 years ago. The Three's level mental riot directly destroyed an organization, leaving no one alive in the entire organization. At that time, Zhongqing suppressed the incident, and no one except them knew about it. This time the situation is more serious. The mental power barrier can rebound mental power to the greatest extent, and this mental power barrier is specially made. No one knows what the threshold is. If Li Ju loses control, all the Three's level mental power will explode. Everyone present will be crushed to death directly. Li Ju is obviously aware of his situation, so he has been trying to suppress the mental power flowing in his body from now on. Although it doesn't look abnormal, it is actually at the end of his strength. A layer of sweat gradually formed on his forehead, his lips were pressed into a straight line, his expression was tense, and the hand holding the particle gun was trembling slightly. Chi Jinkai was the closest to her and naturally noticed something was wrong with her. "Juju. I'm fine. But it doesn't look like everything is okay." Chi Jinkai narrowed his eyes and calmly stepped forward to hug her into his arms. As soon as she got closer, he immediately understood what was going on. The mental energy has become so chaotic that it cannot be suppressed. He suddenly felt heartbroken, caressing her back where no one could see her, and said softly, "Juju, I'm here, it's okay." Li Ju closed her eyes suddenly and took a deep breath. Yes, it's different. No one will blow themselves up in front of her anymore. She couldn't save Moze more than 10 years ago, but today, she must save Chi Mao Yi. Li Ju slowly put down the gun, looked at Los with cold eyes, and asked, "Tell me, what do you want?" Los raised his eyebrows in surprise. "You compromised so quickly? Aju, this is not like you." Li Ju sneered, "Don't you know the reason why I did this?" Her eyes fell on the pale Chi Mao Yi. She paused and said, "You can do whatever you want, but you must let her go. Including, my life." "Xiaju. Xiaju, no." As soon as she finished speaking, Mr. Li and Mr. Qi hurriedly stopped her. Chi Jinkai tightened his arms around her waist, raised his eyebrows, and looked at her disapprovingly, but said nothing. Los was stunned for a moment, then smiled, "Okay, her life will be exchanged for yours, but, they dash." He pointed at Mr. Qi and others, glanced at Ningfeng and others, and said with a cruel smile, "I want your lives in exchange for their lives." "You're dreaming." Lu Qinggran couldn't help but jump to her feet, protected Ningfeng behind her, and cursed, "Do you really think labor and management are afraid of you? Do you believe me?" Before he could finish his words, someone grabbed the hem of his clothes and pulled him to the back. He staggered and was forced to swallow the words in his mouth. Ningfeng retracted his hand, met Los's eyes with a cold expression, and said calmly, "Okay." Meanwhile, others were saying, "No problem. Okay. Okay." Everyone agreed in unison. The others were stunned. "No, are you crazy?" End of this chapter. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy and Faye. Chapter 662. Chapter 646. Let's die together. Everyone in the second team looked normal, and it was hard to tell whether they were joking or serious. Los narrowed his eyes, glanced across each of their faces gloomily, and sneered, "I can't tell, you are much crazier than me. Liju, there is no way. They came from the same place, and the madness in their bones is the same." Before he could speak, Bimweo suddenly said, "Boss, I made a mistake. Ji Yunchu, we are not of the same origin as him. Ning Feng, we are crazy. Shen Lu, but not a pervert. Fang Yang, it's not even disgusting." Everyone sang along, and Ross's face darkened visibly, and the strength in his hands became a little stronger. "It seems that you are not going to save them." Law sneered, "If that's the case, then I'll." The next moment, his pupils shrank sharply, and the blood all over his body seemed to be frozen. The air around him was filled with dangerous factors, wrapping him up in it, making him unable to escape or retreat, and the overwhelming murderous intent rushing towards him seemed like a threat to tear him apart completely. Los's whole body was frozen in place, and the terrifying sense of oppression forced him to not move at all. To be careless. He gritted his teeth, and suddenly gathered all his mental power into one point, and attacked the dangerous and oppressive mental power. He finally got a breather in a split second and turned sideways to avoid the attack. However, even so, a layer of skin was cut off from his right arm, and the flesh and skin tissue was exposed, and blood flowed profusely. Los hissed lightly, enduring the severe pain, and raised his eyes to look at the opposite side. If he had read correctly just now, the attack came without any warning, but the murderous intent and danger contained in it were the most terrifying he had ever seen. The space is directly cut off. The target of the attack just now was not him, but the space around him, so he was unaware of it. If he had reacted any slower, he might have been cut into pieces by the divided space on the spot. Able to manipulate and divide space without anyone noticing, the opponent is definitely 3's level in strength. Qi Jinkai calmly retracted his hand, his eyes slightly surprised, and said to Liju, "His strength is not inferior to yours or mine." Even with his distraction, he was still able to dodge his attack. Liju's eyes flashed with anxiety and his eyes were obscure. He came prepared. Even though he had taken action, he still couldn't save anyone. If he delayed it any longer, she really couldn't guarantee what would happen next. Law swallowed the taste of blood in his mouth and sneered, "I have always heard that the association's Q god is unfathomable, and it is indeed well deserved." Qi Jinkai glanced at him coldly, "Same for you." The two people's eyes met in the air, and there were sparks flying. After a moment of silence, Qi Jinkai was the first to speak, "Mr. Luo, you have seen the current situation. We did not take action because you had hostages on your hands. However, you really pushed us into a hurry. Do you think you can? How long can you hold on under me and Jeju?" There is no trace of adulteration in his words. Even if the hand that Los showed just now is very strong, he has absolutely no chance of winning if he and Liju join forces. Los' eyes darkened. He was right. I did all the calculations, but I didn't even include him as a variable. He was not surprised that Liju led the second team to find the shaman, because he did it deliberately, but the team that followed him was indeed unexpected. What's even more beautiful is that this variable actually forced him into the situation step by step. If he hadn't saved a move, he would have really missed a move. Thinking of this, Ross's lips curved into a twisted smile. "Of course I have no chance of winning, but, unfortunately, I also don't intend to go up against you. As soon as he finished speaking, Qi Jinkai and Li Ju's hearts trembled at the same time. Not good. However, before any of them could alert Luz, he had already taken out the controller and pressed it. A set of actions came so smoothly that there was no time to stop him. Hum hum. The next second, an overwhelming resonance wave swept over. Caught off guard, Lu Qingran spurted out a mouthful of blood. His expression was still dazed. He touched his face, and his hands were covered with blood. When he turned around, he saw that everyone was vomiting blood with pale faces. Some people couldn't even hold on and fell to their knees directly on the ground. Looking around again, Qi Jinkai and Li Ju's faces were also very ugly, with a trace of blood spilling from the corners of their mouths. Mental power, resonator. Lu Qingran cursed feebly. His mind was spinning and he couldn't hold on any longer. Ningfen even grabbed his arm to steady himself, with no color on his face. How come? Bai Yuxiu helped Bai Muyu, his expression turned extremely ugly. How could he possibly make a resonator? The mental power resonance meter is the most effective weapon used to deal with people with superpowers, because it directly attacks the mental domain. The frequency of the resonance waves it emits can interfere with the mental power of people with superpowers, causing chaos in the superpowers and eventually the body explodes. And died. This thing has been banned for a long time. How could he have it? The resonator targets all superpowers, and Los is no exception. The moment the resonator was activated, he spit out a mouthful of blood. This move was tantamount to injuring the enemy by 1000 and damaging himself by 800. But Los smiled very happily, even a little crazy. Die. Let's die together. Ha 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 ha. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy Enfe. Chapter 663. Chapter 647 Again. Due to Ross's suicidal approach, all the superpowers present were not much better. The higher the power level of the mental resonance instrument, the stronger the interference. At this moment, Li Ju felt like there were 100 excavators working in her head, buzzing and giving her a splitting headache. The spiritual power in his body surged uncontrollably, constantly flowing through his limbs and bones, and a sizzling purple electric light gradually appeared all over his body, almost making him want to go berserk. Fortunately, there was a warm chest covering her back, and the man gently pressed her temples, instantly taking away all her anger and irritability. But Li Ju's expression was still not much better. She gritted her teeth and muttered, "Leave me alone." The two of them have about the same amount of strength. The pain she is suffering at this moment is exactly what Qi Jinkai has endured, and yet he insists on using supernatural powers to soothe her mental strength. It is simply indiscriminate. Qi Jinkai's voice sounded depressed, with a touch of blood. "Don't be afraid, I'm fine." Having said that, if Li Ju turned around, she would definitely see that his handsome face was extremely pale and bloodless. Both of them are holding on. At this time, the only people in the field who were not affected were the two old men. The people behind them were rolling on the ground with their heads in their hands and had no time to pay attention to them. "Chief, leader." They howled in pain, hoping that Los would show mercy. But Ross was obviously crazy at this moment, and his lips had already been bitten with deep teeth marks. Despite this, he still pressed the controller again without hesitation. The interference frequency of the resonator is immediately doubled. Plop. Everyone knelt down. Li Ju and Qi Jinkai were no exception. They knelt on one knee but straightened their backs. It could be seen from their expressions that they were desperately fighting against the resonance device. The weaker ones were all knocked unconscious and lay on the ground. The remaining people also supported each other to prevent themselves from falling. Abominable. Chi Saijin cursed in a low voice and hit his knees the ground. His body was as heavy as a stone, and he couldn't even lift his arms. It was as if someone had suddenly exerted gravity on his whole body. He reluctantly looked at Chi Maoyi who was being held hostage in front of him, and wanted to rush forward to save her. The next moment, he felt a sharp pain in his head. Now, even if there is a chance to save people, they cannot do it. It was precisely with this thought that Ross dared to plot against himself. He was the most affected, but he still controlled Chi Maoyi tightly to prevent her from breaking away and escaping while he was not paying attention. Soon, he discovered a problem. Chi Maoyi seemed to be, also affected by the resonance meter. This discovery stunned Los for a moment. Could it be that she? Are you awake? This is not surprising. Chi Maoyi is an experimental subject. She has a variety of superpowers integrated into her body. She is considered a superpower in her own right. Even if Zhongqing uses his own mental power to seal her mental domain, once she is guided or stimulated, the seal will be like window paper, broken as soon as it is poked. The most stimulating thing in the spiritual realm is the strange stone, and there are strange stones hidden in various laboratories of the Chalig. It seems that when she was escaping, she accidentally touched the strange stone. The power contained in it loosened the seal, and she showed signs of awakening. Thinking of this, Los felt that he had received a huge unexpected surprise and kept laughing. It really took no effort at all. The seal on her spiritual realm has been loosened, which means that the nightmare in it will spread to her whole body, and she will eventually die of torture. Ross smiled and said, "What a pity. If I could take you out alive today, I would have dissected you, extracted the nightmare, and then spread it to all parts of the world. Ha 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 ha, cough 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 dash." Because of his excitement, he kept coughing. Chi Maoyi is suffering pain that she has never experienced before in her life. Her head is buzzing, and her thoughts are broken into fragments, emerging like false phantoms, and fleeting, too fast for people to catch. She was completely unable to think independently, and her whole person fell into darkness and nothingness. In her hazy state, she vaguely saw some strange scenes that she had never seen before. The memories of her childhood were the long-forgotten time before she was adopted. Those memory fragments were in disarray, flashing through her mind like a movie, unable to be connected together, and she still couldn't remember anything. Chi Maoyi smiled bitterly. What this person said seemed to be true. Even if she didn't want to believe what he said, she still had to admit that it was probably the truth. Hearing the undisguised laughter of the person behind her, she gradually began to give up her resistance. A look of determination flashed across her eyes, and the corners of her mouth turned up into a smile. "Forget it, that's it. As long as you drag him to death, the others will be saved." With the thought of dying together, Chi Maoyi struggled to open her eyes, wanting to take one last look at Li Ju. She opened her mouth slightly and made a mouth shape. At that moment, a biting coldness instantly enveloped Li Ju, and a familiar feeling of powerlessness surged into her heart. Her pupils shrank sharply, and her body couldn't help but tremble slightly. She understood the meaning in Chi Maoyi's eyes. She is saying goodbye. Almost instantly, a strong will took over Li Ju's entire spiritual world. The power came from unknown sources. Her spiritual power spread out around like a tide, forcefully invading everyone's spiritual realm, and her supernatural powers were completely. It broke out, and flashes of lightning flashed around her, carrying the power of killing everything. Chi Jinkai watched the scene silently behind her, as if he knew what she wanted to do. The next moment, he also released all his mental power with her, and the entire barrier was completely filled with their two mental powers. Nothing can withstand the superposition of the mental power of two 3s level experts. What's more, Li Ju still has the intention to leave no room for anything. His strong and deep mental power is constantly leaking out as if he is desperate for his life. In addition, Chi Jinkai is accompanying him. She went crazy together, and Los's expression suddenly changed. Not good. If this continues. Before he could react, there was a slight cracking sound in his ears. Los turned pale. That's a resonator. These two people. He actually used his mental power to burst the resonance meter. The painful buzzing in their heads disappeared, and everyone looked at the two slutty bosses blankly, speechless for a while. Is this even possible? It is true that the equipment will be damaged after the mental power reaches the threshold, but the key is who is so perverted that he has that level of mental power? There really is. These two are indeed the famous twin gods of their association, and they are not typically human. Li Ju didn't seem to realize how crazy her actions were, and how crazy Chi Jinkai was with her. She forced herself to stand up, her eyes were bottomless, as dark as the abyss. People fall. She walked towards Luz step by step, her face expressionless. Luz took 2 steps back uncontrollably and watched in horror as she slowly approached. He was still immersed in the moment when the resonator was destroyed, and Chi Maoyi, who just wanted to say goodbye just now, was also looking at her blankly. Li Ju's eyes suddenly flashed, and he shot towards him like a ghost. He was so fast that it was like an after-image. This was not like the skills he could have after being injured. Los was the most severely affected by the resonator's backlash. He couldn't avoid it, so he took her blow forcefully, and his body immediately flew out like a kite with its string broken. Chi Maoyi suddenly lost weight, and the next moment she was pulled into someone's arms and hugged her tightly. In her daze, she heard Li Ju's voice that sounded like he was about to die after a disaster. Fortunately, you're okay. Now that she has been saved and Luz has been kicked away, there is no longer any threat. Everyone has gradually recovered. He Yao broke free from the restraints immediately and stepped forward to loosen the bonds of Chi Saijin and the 2 old men. During this period, she glanced at Chi Saijin, who looked unhappy, and asked, "Fourth brother, are you okay?" Chi Saijin shook his head. He was fine. What he was most concerned about now was Chi Maoyi. He raised his eyes and looked in the direction of Chi Maoyi. The first thing he did was to check whether she was okay. He was relieved when he saw that Li Ju was pulling her to look at her, and she didn't look like something was wrong. However, the next moment, he suddenly caught sight of something from the corner of his eye, his pupils shrank suddenly, and he lost his voice. Danger. A sudden change occurred. Los, who was kicked away, used his last strength to raise his gun and pointed it at Chi Maoyi's head, with a vicious look in his eyes. Go to hell. Pull the trigger. Boom dash. Suddenly he groaned. Chi Maoyi opened her eyes wide and looked at the man who appeared in front of her instantly to block the bullet in disbelief. She shouted in a broken voice, "Ajin. Fourth brother. Old 4. Well, finally a hero comes to save the beauty. Chi Ziyasi, you are really good at picking up the slack." End of this chapter. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy Enfe. Chapter 664. Chapter 648, You can't live a day without causing trouble. Li Ju reacted the fastest. He raised his hand and shot, hitting the center of his eyebrow. Los reluctantly dilated his pupils, and then died. Chi Maoyi caught Chi Saijin's fallen body, her face was full of tears, her hands were trembling. Ah, Ajin. The shot penetrated the lungs. Chi Saijin opened his mouth and spit out a mouthful of blood. Hold on. Chi Maoyi was confused while holding him, speaking incoherently and not knowing what to do. Others were also in a panic. Lu Qingran was so anxious that he kept saying F***ck, hold on. Don't die. Ningfeng looked at him speechlessly. At this moment, Ji Yunchu walked over quickly, pushed aside someone who was blocking the way, and squatted down to heal his injuries. Chi Maoyi immediately seemed to have grasped a life-saving straw. How is Ajin? Ji Yuncha swept his mental power all over his body, then frowned. No, my mental power is not enough, I must take him back to the association immediately. His condition was worse than she imagined. She had just used most of her mental energy to treat Ning Feng, and now she could no longer treat a seriously injured person. Ji Yuncha raised his head, his eyes were heavy, and he shouted, "Boss!" He saw Li Ju just humming, still standing there, slightly raising his head and looking at the sky not far away. Everyone looked along her line of sight. Through the mental barrier, the sky was dark and dim, filled with dense clouds. A ray of light tore through the clouds. Several fighter planes with association logos flew towards their direction, their fuselages flashing. The scarlet light is extremely eye-catching. Li Ju narrowed his eyes and slowly raised his hand. A thunderbolt as thick as the mouth of a bull struck down from directly above him, effortlessly splitting the mental barrier into powder. She and Qi Jinkai had just used their mental power to explode the resonance device. Likewise, this barrier was also affected, making it fragile and easily broken by a poke. Without the cover of the mental barrier, the people from the association quickly discovered them. Everyone successfully boarded the fighter plane and quickly returned to the association. Association. After getting off the plane, Qi Sijin was immediately pushed into the operating room. Everyone was waiting outside. Qi Maoyi's face was extremely pale, and her hands were touched by Qi Sijin's blood. She hung her head blankly, and then she let out a sob. All to save her. Blame me. She sobbed quietly. It's all because of me. Li Ju was threatened because of her, and Qi Sijin was injured because of her. It's all her fault. Li Ju patted her shoulder and comforted her, it doesn't matter what happened to you, don't blame yourself. Qi Maoyi couldn't hold back at all, turned her head and buried her head in Li Ju's shoulder, crying bitterly. Everyone watched the scene in silence. For a moment, the air was very quiet, and only Qi Maoyi's sobs could be heard. Li Ju stroked her back gently, okay, stop crying. Qi Maoyi raised her head, wiped the corners of her eyes and sobbed, yes, but Ajin. Don't worry, the fourth guy has rough skin and thick flesh, he has been injured more seriously than this and has never died, he will definitely not die this time. Shen Lu suddenly said something. As soon as these words came out, everyone's eyes immediately focused on him. Shen hesitated, did I say something wrong? Fang Yang twitched the corner of his mouth, stepped on him hard, and crushed him a few times. Regardless of his screams of pain, he apologized to Qi Jinkai and Mr. Qi and said with a smile, he has a bad mind, don't mind. Just kidding, Qi Sanyi and Father Qi are here, saying that the fourth brother is thick and thick, do you find death? Being stepped on, Shen Lu also realized that his words were out of proportion. He coughed twice and squatted in a corner to plant mushrooms. Li Ju pinched her eyebrows, and while comforting Qi Maoyi, she said to Mr. Qi, Grandpa Qi, old, cough, Si Jin is in there, it will take some time, why don't you and Grandpa go for a checkup too? Having been arrested by Los for so long, I am not afraid of 10,000, just in case. Mr. Qi shook his head and looked in the direction of the laboratory with heavy eyes, no, I'll wait for Ajin to come out. His grandson is currently undergoing surgery and his life or death is uncertain. How can he feel relieved? He had said so, and Li Ju couldn't force him, so everyone had to wait for Qi Sijin to come out. At this moment, Zhongqing and Mia hurried here. As soon as they arrived, they saw everyone sitting or leaning there with pale faces and exhausted expressions, silent and not talking. He immediately lost his temper and scolded directly, you can't live without causing trouble for me for a day, right? Let's see how capable you are, how dare you break into someone else's base camp alone, do you want to go to heaven, ah? End of this chapter. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy Enfe. Chapter 665. Chapter 649, the president's skills have improved. Zhongqing looked at the pale faces of Li Ju and Qi Jinkai, and suddenly felt angry and distressed. He pointed at them and scolded them, "You are not 3 years old anymore, why are you still so reckless? Qi Jinkai, this girl is doing this to you. Let her come as well." The two of them let him vent, and then Qi Jinkai hugged him into his arms, looked at Zhongqing's angry eyes, and said calmly, "I'm sorry. It's because he failed to protect Li Ju." After hearing these two words, Zhongqing became even more angry. "Now that I know I was wrong, is it useful?" He looked at everyone with hatred and gritted his teeth, "Look at what a bear you have turned yourselves into. What I know is that you have destroyed the base camp of the Shimeng League, and those who don't know think that I have one of my men. The second team was all beaten up. Do you want my face?" Zhong Qingzhen didn't expect that Li Ju would be so crazy as to make fun of his own life. God knows, when he heard that she used her mental power to explode the resonator, his legs were weak. He was afraid that something would happen to her, but this girl, fortunately, he looked like nothing was wrong, and he didn't feel any guilt at all. Mia was advising beside him, "President, please calm down, Aju is fine. You go aside." Mia was yelled at and the corners of her mouth twitched. She glanced at the two old men standing next to her and swallowed the second half of her sentence silently. She really wanted to say, "President, your image is almost gone. The looks in the eyes of the two old men when they look at you have changed from surprise to indescribable complexity." Seeing Li Ju lowering her head, Zhongqing thought she realized she was wrong. He paused and his tone was no longer so excited, but still not very good. "Have I ever told you not to be impulsive? What about the board of directors? The old guys are in trouble. I can send someone to pick you up after I take care of it. Don't you have to wait a moment and have to take the risk yourself? And you?" Zhongqing turned to look at Qi Jinkai, his face immediately softened, "Why didn't you stop her? Brat, is this how you spoil your wife? You have to make me mad to death, right?" He scolded them for 3 minutes without stopping, spitting at them regardless of their image, and scolded both of them so hard that Li Ju finally couldn't bear to listen and sighed, "Old man, you calm down." "How can I calm down?" Zhongqing's mouth was dry as he spoke, but he still showed no sign of getting angry. "A vice president and a young president are risking their lives together. What, do you have the idea of breaking up at the same time and leaving this big mess of the association to me? Li Ju, Qi Jinkai. Everyone." Shen Lu took out his ears, clicked his tongue, lowered his head and complained to Fang Yang, "The president's skills have really improved." He scolded him for 3 minutes without taking a breath. "It was even worse than before we left. It seems that he has been a lot less powerful in the past few years. Practice your words." His tone was a bit gloating. "You don't need to think about it to know how miserable it will be for those who are used to train their mouths by the president." Although he lowered his voice, everyone around him could hear it clearly, and they immediately said, "I have to say that you have told the truth." Li Ju felt a little tired. "I have a sense of propriety." "You have no sense of propriety. Don't you know your own situation clearly, your mental strength?" He suddenly stopped talking, looked back at Mia who kept tugging at his clothes, and asked with his eyes, "What are you doing?" Mia blinked at him crazily and reminded in a low voice, "President, there are still outsiders here." Zhongqing turned around slightly and realized that he was there early in the morning, but he was too angry to ignore it. So he looked at the two old men who he had been scolding for 3 minutes without stopping, and the expression on his face suddenly became colorful. The atmosphere fell into a brief awkward silence. After a moment, Zhongqing twitched the corners of his stiff mouth, showed a perfect smile, and said, "Ha ha, first time meeting you. I am Zhongqing, the president of the United Association of Superpowers. You two have a long-known name." With that said, he stepped forward to shake hands without any hesitation. The smile on his face was very polite and his expression was as calm as if the person who just cursed was not him. Mr. Chi. Mr. Lee. Everyone. As expected, the president has some social NB syndrome. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy and Fei. Chapter 666. Chapter 650. The two old men looked at each other and really didn't know how to answer this. Hello, hello. Finally, Mr. Lee smiled dryly and shook hands with him. Zhongqing was suddenly unaware of the awkward atmosphere, and continued without blushing, "This incident has frightened you too. In the final analysis, the responsibility lies with us, and I am here to apologize to you." He was right. This time the two old men were kidnapped by Los. Due to problems within the council, the association failed in both preemptive supervision and post-event rescue. Although he was very angry at Li Ju and others for acting recklessly to save people privately, he also understood that if they had not taken action in time, the situation of the two old men would have been difficult to say. Zhongqing bowed seriously. Mr. Li quickly said, "No, no, no, I have to thank you very much this time so that we can come back safely." "No, no, you're welcome, this is what we should do." "No." Li Ju was speechless for a while and couldn't help but said, "Old man, can you stop pretending?" Looking at her, she was quite tired. Zhongqing. He turned around, gritted his teeth and said, "Shut up. Stop tarnishing his image in front of outsiders." As everyone knows, the personal image of a certain president had been completely ruined by himself just now. Li Ju rolled her eyes, ignored his indirect convulsion, and asked, "Has the association been cleared out?" She had known for a long time that there was something wrong with the old immortals on the board of directors. Not only did she know it, but Qi Jingkai and Zhongqing also knew that those people who thought they were flawless in their disguise had actually been exposed in front of the supervisory team long ago. "I didn't send it, just to see what they were capable of behind the scenes. It is not challenging to uproot it all at once, but it is interesting to torture it slowly. No, by keeping these people, we caught the big fish of Kameng and Los." When mentioning this, Zhongqing's expression became much more serious, and he said in a deep voice, "Well, those on the board of directors, have their thoughts on your mother." The air was quiet for a moment. Everyone was stunned. Li Ju's mother? Mr. Li's face turned pale and his face was filled with disbelief. Xiaju's mother? Wouldn't that be, gentle? She is still alive? Li Ju stood up abruptly, with a condensed expression on his face. "What's going on?" "Be calm and don't be impatient," Zhongqing said, "every move they make is under my nose. I can't even touch a hair on your mother's head." Even so, Li Ju's face was still ugly. "Where are they?" "They are locked up in a secret cell." Li Ju narrowed his eyes and said, "Old man, let's discuss it." Looking at her expression, Zhongqing knew what she was going to do, and said helplessly, "I'll do whatever you want with me." Speaking of which, he sympathized with that group of people. If you wanted to die, just die. Why did you want to target Yewan? That's the girl's inverse scale. If they offend her, the girl will definitely not let them go. Tisk tisk tisk, he can't stop this girl from going crazy, those people won't survive today. Xiaju. Mr. Li's voice was hard. "Is your mother still alive?" For 20 years, he thought that both mother and son died in the fire. As a result, Li Ju was still alive. He thought this was a blessing, but he found that Wen was also still alive. Li Ju was stunned, not knowing how to speak. How can she explain this? Say that her mother's name is not Wen but Yewan? That she is the chief of the association and not an ordinary person? She fell into silence. Mr. Lee closed his eyes and said, Xiaju, it doesn't matter. Just tell me. I can bear it. I. Cough cough cough. Li Ju opened his mouth and was about to say something when he was interrupted by Zhong Qing's sudden cough. He looked at Mr. Li and Mr. Qi and said with a smile, you two, regarding this matter, it involves the past. It's not convenient to talk about the experiment here. Why don't we find a place to have a good chat? The two old men looked at each other and nodded. It just so happened that they were confused about many things. Zhong Qing immediately asked Mia to take them to the conference room. After the two left, he immediately looked at everyone with sharp eyes. When he saw their droopy looks, his face darkened instantly. Put away your dead, bah, what do you look like, words. Qi Xiaoxi is not dead yet. Everyone. Zhen contemporary face-changing Master President Zhong Qing. Zhong Qing, Ajiu, ACI, take Miss Qi for a checkup to see if there is anything wrong. As for the others. He narrowed his eyes and thought for a moment, then said, I'd better go check it out too, so as not to waste the association's medical resources if something goes wrong. Everyone's lips twitched, yes. End of this chapter. She always loves to sleep. Author, Guy Enfe. Chapter 667. Chapter 651 Starting with Your Mother. Association, Medical Department. There have not been so many people there for a long time, and the usually deserted corridor was filled with people and extremely lively. The little nurse looked at this group of people and couldn't help but cover her red face and scream softly, ah! The person next to you, calm down. How can I calm down, sister, have you seen it, there are so many handsome guys. I'm not blind. Then why didn't you react at all? It's completely abnormal to see so many handsome guys and be indifferent at the same time. The person next to her twitched her lips and handed her the information form that these handsome guys had just filled out. He couldn't bear to break her beautiful fantasy, see for yourself. The little nurse only glanced down, and the excitement and enthusiasm in her heart was instantly doused with ice water. Inspection team. Why are these the kings of hell? The little nurse's eyes instantly changed from obsession to horror, and she stammered, no, 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 why are they here? These kings of will also be injured? No way, who can hurt these non-human beings? The non-humans didn't care about the panic and surprise of the people in the medical department at their arrival. They only cared about one thing. Why doesn't the boss come to check? Shen curled his lips slightly and watched the doctor draw half a tube of blood reluctantly, and kept complaining, I think she and God Q are obviously the most seriously injured. Why did they do the inspection in the end? What bothers him the most about the white coats in the medical department? The next moment, someone raised his hand and gave him a bang. Shen slightly covered his head in pain, who hit me? He looked back and met Ji Yunqi's cold gaze. She said coldly, what do you think about white coats? Dare not. How could he reveal what was on his mind? Ji Yunqi frowned, don't worry, hurry up. Can't this person see that Zhong Qing deliberately drove them away? So stupid. Oh. On the other side, Mia and the two old men pushed open the door of the conference room. The next moment, the three of them were silent. Is this, thief? Mr. Li and Mr. Qi's mouths twitched, feeling a little unbelievable at the messy scene in front of them. Mia. To finish. Forgot that she had just captured everyone in the council here. The situation was a bit chaotic and she hadn't had time to clean it up. She had completely forgotten about it when Zhong Qing gave the order just now. Awkward. She coughed lightly and said apologetically, sorry, it's a little messy here. Mia quickly moved forward and moved two chairs, and said to the two of them, "Please sit down first." When Li Ju and others arrived, they saw the two old men sitting in a mess with tense expressions. Behind them, Mia cleared the ground at lightning speed, so fast that only a shadow was left. Li Ju. Zhongqing. Qi Jinkai. Li Ju's eyes twitched and he turned to look at Zhongqing. "Old man, are you using the conference room to dance?" Zhongqing, you. Does he look like that kind of person? I'm just taking care of the old immortals on the council. Zhongqing's mouth twitched. They insist on acting like monsters during the meeting. What can I do? I can't let them slaughter me, right? We can only spend some effort to invite them to be guests in the secret cell. However, Zhongqing's expression was still a little unnatural, and he smiled apologetically at the two old men. "I'm really sorry, I was neglectful." Mr. Qi waved his hand and said, "It's okay. Let's sit down and talk." Mia knew the current situation and backed out, closing the door, and the huge conference room suddenly fell into silence. The atmosphere was silent for a moment. Li Ju kept his gaze lowered, not daring to raise his head to face Mr. Li. The latter also kept looking at her without speaking. His eyes were complicated and obscure, and his emotions were unclear. Qi Jinkai's eyes never wandered on Li Ju from beginning to end, while Mr. Qi he was obviously absent-minded, with a hint of worry between his eyebrows, perhaps worried about Qi Sijin and Qi Maoyi. Zhongqing looked left and right, tugged the corner of his lips, coughed, breaking the stalemate. I wonder where we should start. There is so much to explain that I don't know how to speak." Li Ju paused for a moment, then finally raised his eyes to look at Mr. Li and said, "Grandpa, where do you want to start?" "Mr. Li, start with your mother." End of this chapter.